This is All 32 Picks and IPAs, your NFL and craft beer fancast, with your hosts Adam Emmert, Brendan Schultz, and Jared Tim. Play along at picksandIPAs.com/join. Hooray football! Hooray beer!
Welcome to All 32 Picks and IPAs. And as the winner last week, I am introducing myself, Brandon Schultz. And joining me this week, finishing up tied for second place, Jared Tim.
Pretty selfish to introduce yourself.
I know.
For a show.
Hey, when I take the win, I have to take them when I get them.
So you're saying if I have a problem with it, I need to pick better.
Exactly. But we've
and Adam Emmert not joining us.
Adam not joining us. He decides that it's more fun to hang out with Santa than to hang out with us.
He's a holiday kind of guy. You know, he's very cheery, jolly.
Yeah.
He's a jolly fella.
No, it was interesting when I was talking to him earlier this week. He said Merry Christmas to somebody, and it sounded like he actually meant it. I think he's been practicing.
Either he's become a really good actor or something is seriously wrong with that guy. He hates holidays.
Maybe it's all the Santa money that he's raking in this week.
It's got to be something. I don't know. I'm gonna have to maybe have a sit down conversation with him about that one.
Adam, are you okay? We've noticed this week you're a little too cheerful for the holidays.
You said Merry Christmas, asshole. What's the deal?
What is going on? Well, before we get into this week's picks, let's mention the beer that we're drinking. The Winterfestbier from Privatbrauerei Egerer in Germany. I'm sure I maybe pronounced one of those words right.
You didn't butcher that at all. I don't.
The beer is definitely Winterfest.
This beer, 5.5%. Not bad. A little bit lighter than other festive winter beers.
Yeah, and we'll get into that in our review segment, but I wanted to mention it before we get going. Jared, what do you say we lock in the picks?
Let's do it. Mine are gold this week, I guarantee it.
Guaranteed. All right.
It's time to lock in this week's picks.
Well, kicking off with a Thursday night football, the Giants 10-4 taking on the Eagles at 5-9. They're in Philadelphia, and the Giants, if they get the win, they are in the playoffs. Who you got, Jared?
You know, I actually think that just given Eli's status in the playoffs throughout the history of his career, they could be a dangerous team. In fact, I kind of want to see them in the playoffs. I do think that they have a decent team. They have some talent, though going into the playoffs, if they do make it, which I do think they will, they don't run the ball very well. And I think but Philly's defense, they've kind of been exposed a little bit in games here. I do think that the Giants have the better roster. I'm going with the Giants on the road.
I'm going with the Giants, too. The defense, I think, to me, is what's been impressing me about that New York team and what's been able to, to give an Eli a chance to win these games and to do it without a running game, like you mentioned. But like you said, Eli Manning in the playoffs, that can be dangerous. And I do want him in the playoffs, too, just to see if they can beat the Cowboys for a third straight time this year. I think that would be fun.
Maybe that's why I secretly want them in the playoffs, because they're the only team that can take them down. And you mentioned that defense, third in scoring behind two other teams, and obviously what one of those teams is.
Well,
but that's
I know what both
impressive.
of them are, and one is Seattle, and the other one's New England Patriots.
Yeah, the ones we lost to.
Yeah. I can tell. I know why you didn't want to mention them by name. So, user consensus on these.
User consensus is pretty big on this one.
Yeah, 86% going with the Giants, only 14% with the Eagles.
I think that's fair.
I think so too. The Eagles, not a whole lot to play for, but they have won a few games at home. So,
yeah, that's true.
It might be fun. Maybe they'll take that chance to have the Giants hold off a week before they celebrate being in the playoffs. All right, moving on.
This Giants team is still inconsistent to me.
True. Saturday. We have Saturday games on the schedule. Almost all the games are going to be played on Saturday, except for we got 2 games on Sunday and 1 Monday night game. Only 2. First one, though, for Saturday. Let's talk about the Minnesota Vikings at 7-7, still hanging in there for the playoffs. going up against the Green Bay Packers, who are 8-6 and looking like a strong team right now. Who you got, Gerrad?
I don't understand the Green Bay Packers. And Brandon, maybe you can help me out with this one, but there was a stretch in the middle of the season where everybody was calling for Mike McCarthy's head. There was something wrong with Aaron Rodgers. He didn't have any offensive weapons. And now all of a sudden they are a force to be reckoned with. But even in that huge downfall that they did have in the middle of the season, they're still 7th in points offensively. Running the ball, they're middle of the pack, not too bad. I wanted to count them out, but I don't think I can. And I think against this Minnesota team that has been kind of just wandering around aimlessly for a while. I mean, they got Adrian Peterson back, but he was fairly ineffective, fumbled the ball. I'm going Green Bay at home because I think somehow, and I'm not sure how, Brandon, maybe you can help me with that one too. Somehow they have found their mojo. They got it back. I'm going with Green Bay at home.
I'm going with Green Bay as well. 89% user consensus on this one to 12% for the Vikings. People definitely jumping off the Minnesota bandwagon after they just got blown out by Indy. And a lot of people had the Vikings picked to win against Indy last week. And luckily, I'm going to take credit for my risk pick on that one. Although we didn't record a show last week, that was my risk pick.
Yeah.
You asked the question about the Packers and what's going on with them. I mean, the crazy thing with them is they've actually found a running game with Ty Montgomery. He looks like a legitimate running back. And earlier this season, when they had no running game and they had no defense, I mean, they still have no defense. They gave up. That game was way too close against the Bears than it should have been.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
lot of that had to do with that Packers defense, just allowing a third string quarterback to go up and down the field on it. Well, let's move on to the Titans and Jaguars. Jaguars fired their coach, Gus Bradley, and the user consensus is equally recognizing that, giving them a 6% chance to the 94% user consensus for the Titans.
I like the Titans. They've been playing really, really well. I think Marcus Mariota's got something going, especially with that run game. Their defense has played better. I was a believer in Gus Bradley, and I really didn't want to see him get hacked just because I didn't really see him as the issue. He's been dealing with Blake Bortles, a young roster. He started out with basically nothing. I still think it was a little bit early to kind of fire him, but Tennessee, I still think they're going to win that division over Houston, who's going with Savage this week. But I got Tennessee in this game especially because I just think they're more talented than Jacksonville. And I think Jacksonville's kind of given up, especially after the coach being gone.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things that, they kind of gave up before their coach was gone, right? They only have 2 wins this year for a Jaguars team that we expected to at least have 6 or 7 wins by this point of the season. They were kind of that team you expected to do well. Instead, it's the Titans team that's really kind of taken over this division. And to me, it definitely seems like they're the hot team. Texans, I think they made the right choice. We can talk more about that later, but they clearly saw that if they're going to make the playoffs, they needed to make a change. But the Titans, to me, with the running game, with Mariota, with their defense, easy pick to see them winning on the road in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and I mean, these 2 teams are probably the biggest surprise and disappointment, right? Playing each other. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, like you said, is just a big disappointment. They were supposed to be that 500 team and kind of on the upswing, especially with their roster. And Tennessee, we didn't expect them to make any splashes really this year out of the norm, and now they're going to win this division and potentially be in the playoffs and maybe even do something there.
Moving on to the Cleveland Browns, the 0-14 Browns at home, taking on the 5-9 San Diego Chargers. Gerrad, this might be the last chance the Browns have to get a win, considering they're playing a team with a losing record at this point, and next week they play the Steelers.
Yeah, I agree, but I don't think they're going to do it. I mean, maybe in Charger fashion this season because they tend to lose games that they really shouldn't. Cleveland has a chance, but I'm not taking a chance to go against the Chargers against Cleveland just for the sake of my picks. This is pretty close to a toilet bowl, maybe not quite, but I'm going Chargers on the road.
It's close, although I think it does have as many combined wins as this week's toilet bowl. So I'm going with the Chargers too. 90% of users going with the Chargers, 10% with the Browns. And plus, I think I'm going with the Chargers because we've seen Adam take the Browns on multiple occasions, thinking that he can pick the 1 week that they're going to get the win. I think this is going to be tempting for Adam. To take Cleveland this week.
I feel like he's going to make a sympathy pick at some point for the Browns, and this might be it.
This is going to be it. That's and so you and I will each get a win over them. I think this is a good strategy. Moving on, an AFC East matchup: New England Patriots 12-2 against the 4-10 New York Jets. I think this is going to be an easy pick.
I don't know what a game this would be 10 years ago, but I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this. The Patriots are rolling. They just got a good win in Denver, who the Broncos were the only team that Belichick didn't have a winning record against, but it's going to be hard to stop the Patriots. This is one of those teams you just can't make any mistakes. Otherwise, they will win. If you make one mistake, you're not going to beat the Patriots. And as we know about this season with the Jets, they make a lot of mistakes. Not going to happen. Patriots.
Yeah, they have not been impressive with their backup quarterback playing, I think. And then we saw Ryan Fitzpatrick come in relief.
Yeah.
The Jets are just not good. Yeah, Bryce Petty. I guess he was injured against the Dolphins, wasn't he? So,
but
he's playing banged
I don't know.
up.
This Jets team, they've highly underachieving team this year, I think.
Yeah, I think there's a good reason why they're at 2% to the Patriots 98%. I think Jacoby Brissett could be quarterback in this game, and the Patriots would still be favored by a lot.
They could get Ryan Mallett back, play him, and it'd be fine.
They could get Ryan Leaf back and probably be okay. I have no idea what Ryan Leaf is doing right now, but
I hope for his sake he's out of jail.
That would be a good start.
Yeah, I don't think he's throwing any footballs around.
No. Moving on, the Washington Redskins at 7-6-1, traveling to Chicago to take on the 3-11 Bears. Redskins hanging on to their playoff hopes, but they're going to have to get through the Bears to do it. What do you think, Gerrad?
Well, I think they'll get through the Bears. As far as their playoff hopes go, I don't really know. I mean, they're not going to make a splash in that division. I don't see the Giants giving up that much ground because it's almost impossible for them to give up that much ground now. But when you look at the playoff picture as far as the wild card goes, I think Green Bay is going to continue to win. So Washington, with their inconsistencies, might have played themselves out of the playoffs. But in this game, when you look at this Washington offense, I mean, third in yards per game at 406, second in passing yards at 303. Those are impressive numbers, and this Bears defense is not equipped to deal with that. I'm going with Washington on the road.
Going with Washington. I am as well. 14% with the Bears, 86% going with Washington. A little bit disappointing, though, from the Redskins last week because they were playing at home and they had a Carolina Panthers team. I mean, it was all set up for the Redskins to keep on winning and perhaps get 3 teams in from the NFC East. But I think that loss is going to do it for them. If you can't beat a team with a losing record when you're playing in your own house, that's not a good spot to be in going into the playoffs, and I think that's what's going to be what keeps them out.
Well, and their defense is just bad. They give up a lot of yards a game.
Well, let's look at this week's winners. And week 15, we had someone here almost pick a perfect slate of games. Angry Northwest Yeti with 190 points. Pretty impressive. The one loss came with the Monday night game with the Skins losing to the Panthers. So, Angry Northwest Yeti was not happy about that.
Probably pretty angry.
Probably pretty angry, yeah. The Graham Cracker at 180 points, and then myself at 170 with a lot of people. I think there were, like 20 so people with 170 points. So, big week. Looking at the overall leaderboard at 1,970 points. Lieutenant Nacho Cheese tied with Biggity Cool. And with 1960, Imiran for 10. And Toonhawk rounding out the top 4 with 1,950 points. So coming down to the end of the season here. Everybody kind of bunching up still up there at the top of the leaderboard. This will be fun.
I noticed I've started to tune out this segment because I'm just never there.
You're never there.
And I'm 5 weeks out from even being close.
Yeah, I know. I'm 300 points behind. So everybody ahead of me would just have to take the last 2 weeks off, and I'd have to actually pick pretty well. It's kind of depressing at this point of the season if you're not at the top. But still, the people in the top 10, I mean, you pick a perfect week, and with considering how some of these, we saw last week, with the Angry Northwest Yeti, 1 game away from picking a perfect slate. And if you do that, you're going to jump up the leaderboard, especially, if you're in the top 10 or 20, that could vault you into the top. So,
yeah, I've even picked well the last 6 or 7 weeks and still not even close. People are pretty good this year.
People are picking really well here toward the end of the season. All right, on to the next game. Another AFC East matchup with the Buffalo Bills at home, 7-7, taking on the Miami Dolphins. This one might be the first game so far that isn't so clear cut, Gerrad.
Go Bills, go Bills, go Bills, and go Bills. I need the Bills to win in the biggest way. Miami lost Tannehill, and I was like, cool, they're going to drop out of there. We need to win a couple games if we can get into the playoffs. But Miami's not really backing down. I mean, they lose their quarterback to an ACL. Not really been a problem. But I don't see the Bills as being intimidated by Matt Moore. I don't see that happening. I'm going to go with Buffalo in this game strictly because I need them to win in the worst way possible. So go Bills. Please go Bills.
Rex Ryan probably agrees with you that they need to win in the worst way possible, especially if he wants to keep his job in Buffalo.
Yeah,
I'm going with the Bills too. I like Matt Moore. It was all he could do to hang on to get the win against Arizona in that game where Tannehill got knocked out. And then they played the Jets. So it's tough to really get a sense of where Miami is going to be at when they actually take on a team that's halfway good.
Right.
And I think the Bills are. So I'm going against the user consensus, 54% with the Dolphins in this game, 46% with Buffalo, but it looks like we're both going Buffalo. And I know Adam would go Buffalo on this one too, because
he would sit here and just go on a 5-minute rant about how much he hates the Miami Dolphins.
Right. Although he tried to tell me that even though he didn't, because he missed picking the first 2 games last week because he was so busy and he forgot that there was Saturday Night Football. He tried to convince me that he had the Dolphins beating the Jets, but I don't necessarily believe him.
No, he would have picked the Jets anyways. There's no way. He hates them that bad. He would get rid of a pick just to not have to pick the Dolphins.
I think so too. An interesting matchup this week with the Atlanta Falcons trying to hang on to that top seed in the NFC South at 9-5, taking on their division rival Carolina Panthers, the team they're trying to unseat as the champions of that division. Who you got, Gerrad?
Well, unseat they will. You said this is an interesting matchup, and I kind of want to wait to hear what you have to say first on this one, because I think this is a much closer game than the user consensus kind of tells us.
This was nearly my risk pick for the week, because seeing the way the Carolina Panthers played last week on the road against a team that was still in it, in the Redskins, trying to get a playoff spot. The Panthers, they don't look like a team that's just willing to ride this thing out. And they look like a team that's going to play all the way to the end and give their division rivals a shot at and make them go through them to actually get that division title. And with this being in Carolina, I'm tempted to take Carolina, but I'm going user consensus on this one. 79% with Atlanta, 21% with Carolina. I just think that that number one offense with the Falcons is just going to be too much for that Panthers defense. And we don't know if Kuechly, he's cleared to play, but I don't know if he's going to be back in this game. Going Atlanta.
Okay, so I really wanted to pick Atlanta because it seems like that's something you should do. I mean, all the numbers clearly say that they are one of the best offenses in the league. But I think Carolina, they have a young enough team to where they're very emotional. They're kind of a momentum team to me. And after beating Washington on the road, I think they're going to be riding some momentum into this game. And I can't really count out Cam Newton because he's got a lot of energy no matter what. And I know Carolina's defense has been pretty crappy. I think Kuechly is probably going to play this game. Atlanta's defense, not so good. And Cam Newton still can play. I think this just feels to me like one of those games that Carolina is going to win. And so I'm picking Carolina in this game. And I don't feel great about it, but I just feel like they're going to win it somehow. At home.
It almost feels like a coin flip type of game to me because the Carolina Panthers, with their offense, being able to run the ball, having a good running team is kind of the formula for beating the Falcons, I think. And being at home, it definitely seems a lot closer, but I got to stick with user consensus on this one. Moving on to the next game, I don't think it's going to be quite as close. The Oakland Raiders, 11-3. They are in that top spot in the AFC West right now, with Kansas City falling last week, and the Indianapolis Colts. They're still hanging in there for a playoff spot in their division, getting a win over the Vikings last week, and they're now at 7-7. But they're going to need some help from those Texans and Titans team to lose. Do you think the Colts have enough to stay in the playoff, or are they going to get eliminated against the Raiders?
I think they might get eliminated, but ever since Derek Carr's hand injury, he hasn't been quite the same, and their running game definitely isn't the same with Osemele missing time. I don't know if he's going to be back. I didn't actually look into that, but the left side of the line, next to Donald Penn, just hasn't been the same after he went out. And that was one of the things I meant to look up before we started the podcast. Unfortunately, I didn't. I hope you're doing that right now.
I'm not.
But man, he's good next to Donald Penn. And the Colts just don't have a defense. And if Derek Carr can throw less, kind of let that hand start to heal, and they can run the ball better, I don't think they'll have any problem against the Colts. But the Colts have been kind of playing hot lately. So I think this might be a close game if that offensive line is still in question. But I definitely do have the Raiders in this game.
I have the Raiders as well. I don't think Osemele, I don't know if he's going to play. He didn't practice today. Okay. So when you're not practicing this late in the week, especially with the Saturday game, probably going to see him. Yeah, probably going to see him sit out. But I don't know if there's anybody on the Colts defensive line that I would necessarily worry about, right?
Yeah. And with the way that the Raiders do play on offense, they play game clock football. And if you can get Andrew Luck out of rhythm and keep the ball out of his hands, that doesn't bode well for Indianapolis.
This could be a fun game, though. If Andrew Luck has one of those games where he's on point and getting it to T.Y. Hilton and not throwing interceptions, this could be a shootout type of game with Derek Carr and Andrew Luck, and that could be fun. But user consensus on this one, 89% with the Raiders, only 11% with the Colts. I am going Oakland, and I kind of like them at this point to hang on to that top spot in the West.
Yeah, I agree. They're playing pretty well.
The Chiefs, you can't lose it. Who the heck did they lose to? Oh, it was the Titans. And they were at home. It was.
The Titans are steamrolling the AFC West right now.
Yeah. Wow.
Wouldn't have seen that coming.
All right. Well, we'll move on to the other West, the NFC West. And in another game where the Seahawks have already edged out the last year's title winners, the Arizona Cardinals. They have the top spot in the West. They're hanging on to the number 2 seed. And Gerrad, who do you got in this game against the Arizona Cardinals and Seattle?
Well, I don't see Seattle giving up ground in that number 2 seed anytime soon, especially since Atlanta is going to lose to Carolina. But I do have some questions about the Seahawks. I mean, they lost a couple of weeks ago. Their last week victory against the Rams was fairly ugly. I'm kind of wondering, as far as leadership goes and just as far as ability in the secondary goes, how big that loss of Earl Thomas really was to this team as a whole. I mean, I'm going Seahawks just because the Cardinals are pretty bad and the Seahawks definitely have their number. But down the stretch and going into the playoffs, and Brandon, you're going to be the one to tell me what you think about this and how I should feel. But is this Earl Thomas injury really going to hinder their playoff hopes and as far as getting back to a Super Bowl?
Yeah, it doesn't help. I mean, when you lose your best player on defense, it definitely is not a good thing. But we saw with the Pro Bowl votes, I mean, they have guys making the Pro Bowl, 4 guys, and then, in terms of alternates, you got KJ Wright as an alternate, and Cam Chancellor as an alternate as well. So definitely have guys to pick up the slack. And to me, this is the one I'm going to be watching to see if Steven Terrell can really pick it up for Earl Thomas, because Carson Palmer is going to be going deep and testing that safety in this game. We heard from Carson Palmer this week say that CenturyLink's one of his favorite places to play because it is so challenging. He likes that challenge, and they've actually done well. The Cardinals have won 2 of their last 3 games going up to Seattle. With that defense, they're not out of this for sure. And a user consensus of 7% to me seems a little bit low, considering all those factors. But now that they are officially eliminated from the playoffs after losing to New Orleans last week, easy pick for me, considering 93% going with Seattle. It's most people going with Seattle in this one.
Well,
at home.
User consensus
Undefeated
is tough
at home
in this game because it is a divisional game. And divisional games are always harder, especially with the Arizona Cardinals, because they do still have a lot of talent on that roster.
They still have a lot of talent, but I do like Seattle to finish the season undefeated at home this year.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to another NFC West matchup and this week's Toilet Bowl, Gerrad. The 4-10 LA Rams against the 1-13 San Francisco 49ers. They're playing in LA. Who do you like in this game?
Well, this is the Saturday game I will not be watching, but I will tell you that the Rams will win this game because the 49ers have completely given up on the season, and the Rams have fired their coach. There's a lot of different things happening. Maybe there's enough interest in that team to try to win this game at home. Going Rams in the toilet bowl.
Well, this is my risk pick for the week. I'm going with the 18% of people going with San Francisco. Yes, the 49ers only have 1 win this season, but that one win was a 28-0 victory in the opening week against the LA Rams. So with the Rams firing their coach and seeing those questionable coaching decisions that they had against Seattle, you mentioned that game, Seattle wasn't all that convincing, but it's a 24-3 deficit could be, winning by 3 touchdowns. You're supposed to feel pretty good about beating a team. But I think the coaching decisions in that game had a lot to do with why they put up so few points. And that's why I'm liking the Niners.
Yeah, I don't disagree with this risk pick. This would have been my number 2 on the list of risk picks if I didn't think irrationally that Carolina was going to beat the Falcons. But man, I don't know. Jared Goff, boy, I think it's going to be a few years before he's actually ready to play.
Yeah, it's he's shown some good things, but I think having an offensive line would really help him out. And
it would help big time.
And having an offensive line would help out Todd Gurley too, because they just they can't run the ball well right now, and it's kind of all on Jared Goff. It's going to be an interesting week. I mean, the 49ers do have a bad team, so the Rams could walk away with this game pretty handily. But if Goff throws some picks, it could make it interesting.
Well, and Jared Goff's in a tough situation. But where is the logic in signing a coach to an extension and then firing him right away?
Well, from what we heard with Jeff Fisher, he had actually been re-signed in the offseason before the season even started. And so I have to wonder if that was just some, PR on Jeff Fisher's side, trying to make it look like the team had done this re-signing as they were struggling, especially with Eric Dickerson calling on him to be fired. For it to just kind of leak out there just about that time, it almost seems like it was kind of a play to try and save his job at the last minute.
Must be, but he needed to go. I think we all agree with that.
Yeah. Well, it's sad for us Seahawks fans because, one less team in the division you had to worry about. But as we saw, they got rid of him and we won. So maybe we should be really happy.
That's true. Any perspective on who the coaches will be for them next year?
Well, Adam really mentioned that he likes Tom Coughlin, but Coughlin's kind of being mentioned for the Jaguars gig right now. Huh. I do like that I'd like Tom Coughlin coming back in. And then you have your coordinators, Josh McDaniel. You got who's the coordinator for the Schottenheimer?
Yep. Brian
Schottenheimer, maybe. Yeah. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see
I don't think John Gruden's
the guy wants to take on that situation. I mean, yeah, you got a young quarterback who was drafted high, hasn't really proven himself too much, but really hasn't played too bad. So it'll be interesting to see who wants to take him on.
I kind of like the thought of John Gruden coaching them, with as people have brought up, so many Raiders fans in the LA area. We saw how many Raiders fans because they all showed up in San Diego last week and just made that their own house. That was kind of fun to see. But seeing him come back and maybe he could win over some of those Oakland fans and be kind of that big splash hire that LA's looking for. I just don't know if they're going to get that big splash type of guy. I don't know if he's out there, and I don't know if that's the right situation. You come in with a good defense, for one.
That's true.
The offense, you kind of are in a tough spot. You're in a rebuild. Well, it's tough to say a rebuilding spot because you have a young quarterback who is a number one pick. Mm-hmm. It's going to have to be someone who can really develop that a quarterback, I think.
Like a Josh McDaniels type of a guy.
Maybe.
I just don't think Gruden's going to give up his cushy gig right now.
No.
I mean,
that's not a job that is, one, easy to get, and two, once you're in it, it's
not easy to give up.
Right. Yeah. I have to think it's a pretty good gig. All right. Moving on to Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're still hanging in there. Still have potential to win that division if the Falcons were to drop a game to the Panthers this week. But the Bucs are going to have to go into New Orleans and play Drew Brees, the Pro Bowl snub Drew Brees. Saints at 6-8, Tampa at 8-6. Who you got in this one? This is kind of an interesting game.
This is an interesting game. I mean, Tampa Bay is still very much alive in the playoffs. I mean, they could still win the division potentially. They could get into a wild card position potentially. They have a lot to play for. And when they played Dallas, when I watched that game last week, they had more than enough opportunities to beat Dallas. I thought they were going to be able to do it. They had the momentum, but then they started making mistake after mistake after mistake. And that's something that you cannot do against a Dallas Cowboys team that is going to run the ball against you, use up as much of the clock as they can, and not turn the ball over. But Tampa Bay has had a lot of opportunities. This is kind of a prove-it game for me as far as Tampa Bay and Jameis Winston goes. I think they can do it, but also, how pissed is Drew Brees going to be? I'm going Tampa Bay here, but I don't feel very good about it because I think Drew Brees is going to throw out an FU game. You know what? I'm switching this to New Orleans because I don't think Drew Brees is giving this game up. Brandon, what do you got?
I'm with you. I think this is going to be that FU game from Brees, especially in the division, going up against the Bucs. And like you said, it's just, I don't know if Jameis is going to be able to go throw for throw with a guy like Drew Brees without making the mistakes. I know Brees can go a game and throw it all over and not throw any picks. But I don't know if Jameis can do that to try and put up as many points as they're going to need to put up against the Saints in their own house. Only 42% user consensus on this game, 58% with the Bucs. The Saints actually favored in this game as far as the betting line goes. They are 3-point favorites. So
wow.
Going New Orleans in this one too.
Okay. Drew Brees, what do you got?
Yeah, let's see it. All right, next up, the final matchup on Saturday's slate of games, the 8-6 Houston Texans at home against the 5-8-1 Cincinnati Bengals. Gerrad, the Texans, are they going to be able to hang on maybe for one more week to that top spot?
I think they are, and this is why. I have been saying for about 3 or 4 weeks now that Houston's going to start dropping games like it's a hot potato, and Tennessee is going to be able to take in that first spot. But they keep finding ways to stay up there, to stay in the lead in that division. And this game, I was like, okay, at some point, they're going to be dropping these games. But now it's against Cincinnati, who can't find a way to win it. And I think the benching of Brock Osweiler is going to light a fire under this Texans team, maybe for just another week to not give up that top spot to Tennessee. Unfortunately, I don't like to do this, but I'm going to have to pick Houston. The Tom Savage-led Houston Texans.
Yeah, I think they have one more week to hang in there before I think ultimately they lose to that final game, that AFC South championship game in Tennessee next week.
Yeah,
but that's going to make next week's game interesting. Yep. But I like Tom Savage getting the win here against the Bengals, and they are going to be playing at home. And one thing I liked about Savage was as soon as Osweiler went down, he started getting the ball to DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah.
And how Hopkins doesn't have 1,000 yards. That tells you all you need to know about Osweiler, because when you have a guy like that, you just throw it to him.
That's what you would text me during the game. You're like, how does he not know just to throw it up to him? I was like, man, you got me.
It was good to see Savage knew what to do, and they end up bouncing back, because being down to the Jaguars, that may have been exactly what this team needed for Bill O'Brien to finally make that decision to bench Osweiler. But I'll be going Texans. 73% of users going with them, 27% going with the Bengals.
That had to be a tough decision for Bill O'Brien to make, given all the money that they put into Brock Osweiler. One reason, or two reasons, that I kind of want the Houston Texans to win this game is, Brandon, like you said, for next week's AFC South showdown, kind of approve it. If you want this division, you got to win the game. I like those types of games. Those are the best types of games to watch other than playoff football, because it really is a playoff game in itself. And if Houston wins this weekend and Savage plays decent, it just further engraves the fact that John Elway is in fact a brilliant, genius mastermind of football in every sense.
Well, it definitely is looking good for Elway at this point. And he made the right call. I'm pretty clear on that.
Yeah. Yep.
Next up, this week's beer review.
Let's talk about the Winterfest from Privatbrauerei Egerer. As we continue our tour across Germany, we have our Christmas beer. So Merry Christmas, everybody.
That's right. Merry Christmas. A Merry Christmas from Adam, too, I believe.
Yes, a sincere one. What did you think of this beer, Gerrad? This was for you mentioned it off the top, for a Winterfest. A little bit more mild, I think, than your traditional Winterfest type beer.
Yeah, quite a bit more mild, actually. A lot of your winter seasonal beers are really dark, really high in alcohol. And this one was honestly pretty mild. I mean, it didn't even have too dark of a color. It's 5.5% in alcohol. And I thought it had a bit of a sweetness to it, too. I was expecting it to be a lot more bold, but pretty light for a winter beer, which is, when we're all in the season of drinking these darker, festive holiday ales, this was a nice change.
Yeah, it was. I think this is more of a Märzen type style beer. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it was sweet. It was nice and smooth. I enjoyed this beer quite a bit.
Yeah. I've enjoyed the tour of Germany.
I know. And we still have half a pack to go, even though, with our advent calendar, we should be, almost through it by now.
Yeah.
We gotta make it last through the playoffs, though. Did you finish yours already?
No. I still got a few left. Come on, give me some credit.
We got to get through our playoff games, Jared. Come on.
But we're supposed to be done with these beers by December. We're moving on after December.
You're taking the advent calendar thing very literally. And I don't even know if you got this advent calendar at the beginning of December. So I think you're doubling up.
I don't think I cracked open these beers until pretty late into December. And now all of a sudden they're almost gone. Like I said, I've enjoyed the tour of Germany.
I guess you have. All right, matchups on Sunday. Before we get into these, can we just take a minute as we've talked about these potential games coming up next week with those title games within the division? How about the NFL scheduling these title type or the backloading the schedule with these in division matchups? So, we potentially have those types of games in week 17. That was a really good idea.
They've done a great job with it. I mean, they've gotten better and better at it, I think, every single year.
Yeah.
I mean, now we have Baltimore and Pittsburgh coming up. You have Denver and Kansas City. There's just good games across the board that have a lot of meaning to them.
Yeah, and we talked about the Falcons and the Panthers, even in a game like that, where you have a team that can play the spoiler.
Yeah.
It makes it interesting. So, speaking of the Ravens and the Steelers, let's get into it. The Pittsburgh Steelers playing at home, 9-5, taking on the Ravens, 8-6. That Ravens defense looking awfully good. Is it going to be enough to take down the Steelers at home, Jared?
The Ravens defense does look good. And the Ravens beat them the first meeting. I think they are a little bit more consistent than the Steelers, and I think it makes next week's games a lot more interesting in the AFC North. So I'm going Baltimore mainly because I want to see them win this game so that there's a lot better games next week. And frankly, I think that the Ravens have the consistency to do it. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair, but I like their defense better. And in these cold weather games in December, defense wins football games. I got the Ravens on the road.
Interesting. Yeah, that would be, in fact, a risk pick type of pick for this game. 17% going with the Ravens, 83% with the Steelers. And I don't disagree with you, though. I think the Ravens, as well as they're playing on defense this year, that and the fact that they already did take down the Steelers, I just don't know with the playoffs on the line for the Steelers, and because they're going to need to hang on to win that game at home to really hang in there, right? Because I guess I could see the loser of these two games, either the Ravens or the Steelers. I could see them both getting into the playoffs, especially with the way the Dolphins are playing right now, with not having Tannehill at quarterback, because they are in that number 6 seed right now. So, but you're going to need the Steelers to lose, Jared, just to have the Broncos, if they can continue to win to get into that final seed. So this really could be interesting if you have a bunch of 8-6, you have a bunch of 8-6 teams right now, 3 of them. You have the Dolphins. If they lose, then they could be at 9-6. So if those teams get a win, this could be interesting coming down to the wire here. But just because you went Ravens, I think I'm going to go Steelers on this one. And I do like that a lot of people are picking Steelers, and I don't want to go against that. So, it
would be it would be nice for Baltimore to lose, because then if we did beat the Chiefs this week, we would be a bit above them. If Miami lost, we could still squeak into the playoffs. We need a lot of things to happen, but if Baltimore lost, it would actually benefit us. So that's another point to my picking, is I picked so putridly this year. If I pick the Ravens, I feel like they'll lose.
And that's part of my point in picking the Steelers too, but all about the strategy.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the Broncos, the defending Super Bowl champions. They're going on the road to a place in Arrowhead where the Chiefs don't seem unbeatable this year. And at 10-4, I know they've lost at least 2 of those games at home. But what do you? I'm thinking you're probably going to go Broncos on this one.
I'm probably going to go Broncos, and I'll tell you why. It's because in these AFC West matchups, and this happens with the Chargers and the Chiefs all the time, where we'll lose at home, but we'll beat them on the road for no reason. This happens all the time. And the first meeting between these two teams was a really, really good game. Came down to overtime. The kick went off the upright through the field goal post to win them that game. It was a heartbreaking loss to the Broncos. It seems like that locker room might have been slightly divided after the game. with the Broncos, but they still need to find a way to win. Unfortunately for them, that defense is really worn down at this point. With that offense not being able to control any of the clock or get any points, that defense is worn down. I mean, if I was an outsider, I might pick the Chiefs just because of that, but I am a Broncos fan, and we need to win these games, and our offense is going to come around. Go Broncos.
Another risk pick for you. The Broncos only at 18% this week. Man. 82% going with the Chiefs, but Gerrad, I'm jumping on board with you. I'm going all Broncos right this week, and because I think this is a game where Adam's going to slip up and pick the Chiefs just because I just have a feeling. Yeah. And the Chiefs, to me, losing to Tampa Bay, losing last week to Tennessee, it totally negates the fact that they beat Oakland at home. And that's just the weird thing to me. I think the Chiefs, it's going to be one of those down years for them at home, and they'll close it out with the loss to the Broncos going Denver.
And Jamal Charles out for the rest of the year.
Oh, yeah. Well, they even really had him this year?
No.
Yeah. The final game of the week, a playoff matchup. A Week 16 playoff matchup, because the Detroit Lions at 9-5, they are coming into Dallas at 12-2. But the Lions, they're actually needing a win this week to kind of stay in the hunt as far as the playoff race goes, because they're going to be taking on Green Bay that final week. The Lions, I believe, they could actually clinch a playoff spot if they get a win over the Cowboys and the Packers lose. So what do you think? Do you think they'll lock up their playoff berth against the Cowboys, Gerrad?
Well, for dramatic effect in next week's games, I hope that they don't. I hope that they lose. Makes the games next week a lot better. But my issue with this game for Detroit is that the Cowboys they don't make a lot of mistakes. And I don't know if they're going to be able to defend the run that well, playing on the road. It'll be an indoor game, so that bodes well for them. I do think this will be a close game, but just like last week when we saw Tampa Bay just make one mistake that kind of put them out of the game, and then they continue to make more mistakes, I think the Lions are going to make that one crucial mistake that is not going to allow them to beat the Cowboys. However, I do think the Cowboys are highly beatable, just not going to lose to the Lions this week. I think it's going to be a close game, though.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if the Lions won this game. And again, another risk pick. If you go with the Lions, 14% is all that going for Detroit. 86% with the Cowboys. A little bit surprising considering how close that game was against Tampa Bay.
Yeah,
and the fact that the Lions, they're in it seemingly every week, and we even saw it. Just this last week, right? They were in that game against the Giants. They had their opportunity to come back and at least tie or take the lead against the Giants in the fourth quarter, but we saw that kind of the Detroit luck finally run out. Yeah, and because they've always been able to come back against teams in the fourth quarter, but no, not this last week. I'm with you, Gerrad. I like the Cowboys in this game.
This could be good, though. I mean, Detroit Lions against the run, 11th. They're averaging giving up under 100 yards per game. So that could be a good matchup for them. I don't know if it's going to happen. I am kind of rooting for the Lions, though, because I hate the Cowboys. But, man, the Cowboys, they've been slowly declining in the end of the year. They lost to the Giants. Like you said, they were beatable last week against the Bucs. So we'll see what happens.
Well, and I just have to wonder how badly that injury to Stafford is hurting him. And is that going to be just enough? Having that injured finger, is that going to be what it takes to keep him from getting those comeback wins at the end of the game?
Right.
I don't know. I'll be rooting for the Lions, though.
Yeah, for sure. Because I hate the Cowboys.
And you'll still have your matchup next week, because if the Packers get their win over the Vikings, then we're still set up for a showdown for the North title.
That could be a really good week in football. I mean, all weeks are good weeks in football, but that could be one of the best ones.
News and interesting topics from around the NFL.
What do you say we get into some topics?
I think we should. And I think you know which one I'd like to start with? The Drew Brees snub.
Let's start with the Drew Brees snub. because Pro Bowl starters were announced this last week, or everybody who got into the Pro Bowl was announced this last week, and notably missing from that list, Drew Brees, who's leading the league in yards and leading the league in touchdowns. How'd you feel about that, Gerrad?
I feel pretty bad about that. I felt like even if he was number 2 in both of those statistical categories, he still would have gotten into the Pro Bowl. I mean, there's not that the Pro Bowl is a huge deal as far as the game or anything like that goes. It's more of a nomination. It's more of an award at this point. But there are certain players that tend to get in every year based on how well they have played throughout their career. And I kind of felt like he would have gotten in just because of that. But on top of that, he does lead in those two, statistical categories. So how could you really keep him out of there? It doesn't make sense to me. I think this is kind of a load of shit to me.
Yeah, it is because, Dak Prescott, yes, he's had a good year. But when Dak Prescott in his rookie seasons making it over a guy Drew Brees might be on the downside of his career, but as much as on the downside of his career he's still better than almost everybody else. He has a 103 quarterback rating, 34 touchdowns, and just he's 200 yards ahead of Kirk Cousins in terms of passing yards. So I don't know how in the world Drew Brees doesn't make this Pro Bowl team because, I guess he is going to make it because he's not going to make the playoffs, and he's probably going to be one of the few quarterbacks, that'll maybe accept a Pro Bowl nomination with all the other QBs being in the playoffs. So he'll be in there, right. But just the fact that he wasn't announced on the initial list is really surprising.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that Dak Prescott got in ahead of him. I mean, I know he's had a really good year, but he's also had another really incredible rookie behind one of the best offensive line I have seen in God knows how long. So when you look at these two guys, if you're comparing to see who gets in, who means more to their team? Drew Brees to the Saints or Dak Prescott to the Cowboys? I think the Cowboys are going to get a lot of wins, whether Dak Prescott's in there or maybe Tony Romo or whoever else at this point. The Saints don't have near this many wins if Drew Brees isn't playing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's easily the MVP of that Saints team, and even in the running for MVP for the league. Yeah, to not make the Pro Bowl. Yeah, pretty wild. Well, I was going to bring up kind of I'll save the happy topic for to close out the show. Let's talk about some college players, Gerrad, because I don't know if you heard about these two college players that I don't even know their names, but just the idea that you got a couple of guys in their final season of their college career saying that they're going to sit out their bowl games so they can start preparing for the NFL. And I think part of the preparation of playing in the NFL is not getting injured in their final bowl game. What do you think about the idea of college players deciding to sit out that one final bowl game before they come into the NFL just to avoid any type of potential for injury?
Well, for starters, I understand why, because there's a lot of big name college players. There are a lot of guys who are just hoping to get into the NFL who do get injured during their college bowl games. And I think it's a really smart decision. It lets you know exactly how important the NFL is to a lot of these players, but it is really bad for college football. I mean, it makes it seem like college football is an addition for the NFL, which actually it pretty much is. And so I don't really disagree with the player wanting to do this, but it's going to, for those college football fans out there, it's going to completely illegitimize college bowls that aren't in the playoff scenario. I mean, I don't think you're going to see any college players who are for the top 4 teams in college football sit out those bowl games, because those actually mean something. But for these pointless games, when you see Houston taking on San Diego State or something like that, if you want to sit out those games, that I really don't have a problem with that. I know there's a lot of college football fans who will, but the top 4 teams, don't sit those ones out.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I don't think that they would either. I think you nailed it on the head. The fact that, Leonard Fournette for LSU and Christian McCaffrey, from Stanford, they're sitting out their games because it's essentially an exhibition game, these bowl games. They aren't going to have any kind of say of whether or not that, they're not going to get any kind of ranking to get him into the, top 5 even. You have the college football playoff that's deciding the champion now. So what's the point in playing in, one, a game where you're not getting paid to play? And two, it's somewhat of an exhibition type of game, right? Because it doesn't mean anything in terms of your conference standings. The only thing you can point to is just kind of the competition side of these guys, and whether or not that says something about their competitive edge, of whether or not they can actually say to their teammates that, yeah, I'm going to sit this one out. That, I think that would be tough to hear as a fellow teammate, but at the same time, I do understand it. Especially when you saw a guy like Tyler Eifert get injured in the Pro Bowl last year. You can get injured in any type of game, and badly, to the point where Tyler Eifert had to sit out the first 6 games of the season. So I think it's probably, I think we're going to start seeing more of this now that we've seen these two players do it. And a big part of that is because there are so many bowl games that really don't mean anything.
Yeah, and I think you're exactly right. This is an exhibition game. It doesn't mean anything. And so that's where you bring up a really good point. They're not getting paid to play. If anything, this could cost you a paycheck if you get injured in this game. I mean, it's completely an exhibition game. And, you'd mentioned the competition level. There are a lot of players who do things in college. They get in trouble. They get arrested. Most NFL teams at this point think that they can fix the egos of these players. I don't think they're looking at this as a downgrade in basically how much of an asset they can be to a team in not wanting to compete. I think the NFL teams, scouts, coaches, front offices, I don't think they'll look at that as a problem at all.
Yeah, I don't see that happening either.
But it's a good point.
Well, some teams may look at it and kind of wonder about that competitive edge that they might have, because more and more teams are starting to look at that. But I think it's just they're getting an early shot at making a business decision. So
yeah, that's true. Let's just say if you got a player who's first round quality and he sits out a pointless bowl game, are you going to pass on him?
No, you're not. All right, and the final topic I wanted to bring up, Gerrad, unless you got another one.
No, that was actually the sitting out the bowl games was one I wanted to talk about too.
Oh, super. Okay. Well, last week we saw Ezekiel Elliott jump into the Salvation Army bucket. The NFL said they aren't going to fine him. It made some players upset because they think there's a double standard. But we saw, maybe we saw why that the NFL didn't fine him. Salvation Army says it's received 850,000 online donations since Elliott jumped in that bucket.
Wow. See, I didn't know about that part of it. I was going to be completely on board with you should have fined him because this is a bunch of crap, because other players would have been fined for doing way less. But that would make me seem like a complete asshole after the statistic that you just gave. So I guess don't fine him. Do it again, maybe.
I just think that the NFL has to have a little bit of leniency on how it makes its decisions. And we saw them not fine guys or even flag guys that went to the ground making snow angels in the snow, because you can't go to the ground in celebration. It just seems, it seems awfully grinchy for the NFL to fine guys in those situations. So I'm glad they didn't do it. I'm hoping what this means, though, Gerrad, is that the NFL starts relaxing on some of those where they've taken some hard lines. Maybe allow guys to do 3 pumps instead of 2.
I hope that they loosen up a little bit too, because it lets you show a little bit of personality in the celebration with some of these players. I think it makes it a lot more fun. And to be honest, I think the fans like some of these celebrations. I mean, I saw Emmanuel Sanders get flagged for doing a pitcher's mound in a pitch celebration. And what I wonder is, if he does get fined, if Ezekiel Elliott does get fined for this Salvation Army thing, do people donate even more because it draws even more attention to it? I wonder how that would work.
That's a good question. But Elliott said that he was going to match if the NFL fined him, he was going to offer that same amount up as a donation. He said he ended up donating anyway, but it was just, I have to wonder if that's, if I were a player though, and I were fined for something similar using a prop or earlier on in the season, I would want my money back.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a bunch of crap for the other players. I thought it was kind of funny. I didn't mind it really, and I'm not a big Ezekiel Elliott fan.
It was funny.
Yeah, I would be really pissed if I was some of these other players.
All right, Gerrad. Well, that wraps it up for this week's show. Good show, even without Adam. I think we filled it out nicely.
Yeah, we don't need him anyways. His perspective is garbage. I hope he listens to this and hears that. And plus, he's enjoying the Christmas season, so I don't really even know if I know the guy anymore.
It's true.
It's like Brandon said, he said Merry Christmas genuinely to somebody. I don't know him anymore.
It's weird. But two things that we do know. Let's go ahead and say them. Hooray football.
Hooray football.
And hooray beer.
And hooray beer.
And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Oh, yeah, Merry Christmas. I forgot about that.
There you go.
Join us on Facebook at facebook.com/picksandIPAs.